maths doesn't math. What is the true stock of arrears? And which sectors are driving it? And when cash is tight, is it the arrears clearance itself that is being squeezed? And by the way, bear in mind that this arrears stock, as I mentioned, was because they went around asking everybody to add up. The proper arrears stock has always been on the gift list. So when he comes tomorrow, he has to tell us which database he's using for his new arrears calculation. Is he using the same formula he used in 2025? Or he's going back to gift list, in which case he'll be comparing apples and oranges. And we believe we need to draw your attention so that all of us examine this in detail. Finally, on this first argument that we've been making about the settings that they are using, the revenue engine of our republic is faltering. The first quarter revenue missed the program target by about 4.5%. Oil revenue fell from about 19.8 billion Ghana cedis in 2024 to 8.7 billion Ghana cedis in 2025. And first quarter oil receipts this year were about 37.6% below target. Does the 268.1 billion cedis full year revenue target still stand, Mr. Minister? Or are you going to revise it downwards? And if it still stands, from where are you going to close this gap without new distortionary taxes on households and businesses? It's important that we all keep an eye on this figure, the revenue figure that Parliament has approved. And as he delivers the mid-year review tomorrow, we ask ourselves, with all of this underperformance, is he going to review the revenue target downwards? Or if he's keeping it, then the question is, where are they going to close the gap from? Because if it is not closed, they cannot spend on the promises that they have made. The question hanging on Thursday is the surplus a policy achievement or a reporting artifact of budgets that were simply not executed? On the evidence, ladies and gentlemen, we are clear that it is the second. Fiscal space created by under-execution is not true fiscal space. It's only a deferral of things that you still have to do at the end of the day. And you'll recall quite recently, we were reminded in a very sad way when, for example, expenses that needed to be made on flood control programs were not done. In the end, when the floods came, we saw the number of people who perished. So fiscal space that is created by under-execution is not fiscal space. The real cost is there for the people to pay. Now let's go to the second part of our three-part conversation. How durable are these settings that they are embarking on? When the props are removed, what will happen at the end of the day? And here, I'll treat it in a number of parts. First, what's going on the IMF? The IMF Executive Board is expected to approve the final ECF review and the new policy coordination instrument around the 27th of July. That's 4 days after the minister will read the mid-year review. Note that the PCI is a non-financing instrument that the government has gone for, still under the IMF. Now, choosing to remain under fund supervision without fund money is an admission that an external anchor is still required for this economy. And the fund's own May statement flags state-owned enterprises, contingent liabilities, quasi-fiscal activities, and gold price over-reliance as continuing risks to the Ghanaian economy. And that's the real reason for which this government has now gone under a PCI, even though the ECF has ended. Now, the second point is that the growth story that we are seeing is on gold. It's not based on any policy. The government will tout the first quarter growth of about 6.4% to say that, the economy is performing, it is rebounding, there's higher growth. This is how they hope to make the argument that we have moved from stability to growth. But go into the details. Industry's growth rate jumped from 1.9 to 6.9%, yes, in one quarter. But if you double click, it shows you that it's on the back of gold mining and export earnings hitting a record $31.1 billion in 2025. Why? Because of historically high gold prices. Now, let me refresh your memory. In 2025, when the minister read the 2024 review and realized that there had been growth in the economy, mostly led by gold, I'm sure you recall what he said. He said that it was galamsey growth. So, today, as they are going to hinge their growth numbers on gold, it is fair to say that what is going on is just galamsey accounting, which they will be touting as growth. If gold returns to its 5-year average price, what will our growth figure be? What will the trade surplus be? What will the primary balance be? Where will they get forex to continue pumping onto the market? And now that matter has been established. We started talking about it in the first quarter of 2025. They disputed it. Now the jury is clear on it. The review that the minister will publish tomorrow must answer this sensitivity analysis, else we are living on borrowed time. The third issue under the second pillar, inflation is beginning to turn and the cedi is beginning to slip. Falling headline inflation never means falling prices. Prices have been rising, only more slowly. And now they are rising faster again. 3 consecutive months, and it's increased to 5.3% in June, the highest since December 2025. And it's driven mostly by fuel costs from the Middle East conflict. Today, Brent crude is averaging about $91 per barrel. You recall in 2022, at the peak of the economic crisis, when crude was about $120, and we kept explaining that that was the real driver of inflation, they said ours was untrue. Today, it's inching up, mostly driven by fuel costs by the Middle East conflict. Meanwhile, the cedi is also depreciated between 8.4 and 10.3% this year, depending on the data source that you are using. Now, you will notice that apart from the debt restructuring that the NPP government did, which led to outright cancellation of about $5 billion of Ghana's debt and cash flow savings of about $4.7 billion, cumulatively, which contributed significantly to a reduction in our debt to GDP ratio, the other part of our debt improvement came from an appreciation of the currency last year. What the currency gave, the currency is now beginning to take back. I'm sure when the Bank of Ghana put out the data, you notice that our debt in cedi denomination is now gone up by about 40 billion Ghana cedis. The appreciation that they touted as a great thing and later counted back as showing that we had improved in our debt numbers in cedi denomination is now going back. And that's mostly why you are seeing this over 40 billion cedi increase in our debt stock. Issue number 4, the government's own debt numbers do not agree with each other, depending on which of their data sources you are looking at. Now, the Bank of Ghana is reporting that debt is roughly about 45% of GDP now as of June. The IMF is also projecting that it will get to 53% before the end of this year. Now, given that Ghana's program with the IMF projects debt to GDP ratio to reach 55% of GDP by the end of 2028, the increased borrowing that we are seeing today means one thing, that this target by the end of 2028 is already at risk. And thus tomorrow the minister must present a proper debt sustainability analysis to convince the people of Ghana that all the sacrifice and the work that the people of Ghana went through to reduce our debt burden is not in vain. Colleagues, I'm sure you recall that just yesterday in Parliament, they came for nearly $1 billion approval. And so already, the debt target by 2028 is at risk. The government should not try to hide this reality in the impending rebasing of the GDP. We will fish it out and we'll calculate for you pre-rebasing and post-rebasing what the new debt to GDP will be, looking at the way they've started debt accumulation just 9 weeks after the IMF left town. But it even raises a bigger question. What does the IMF know that the government is not telling Ghanaians? What is included and excluded, and on what GDP base? The review must publish one reconciled figure and one methodology. Issue number 5, the Bank of Ghana's balance sheet is a fiscal time bomb, colleagues. The Bank of Ghana reports a 2025 loss of 15.6 billion in one instance, and then if you add the other 19 billion together, about 34 billion. And we have argued that if you net off the one-off gold sales, it brings you to about 44.5 billion. Now, independent analysis puts the negative equity roughly around 96 billion Ghana cedis. That's about 8% of GDP. The IMF has named the domestic gold purchase program as a driver of these losses, and recapitalization is promised by 2032. That liability, for example, is sitting outside the budget. but it will demand real fiscal space tomorrow. The minister will need to start answering the questions on that one tomorrow. Every city of it is a road that is not built, it's a classroom that is not funded. And finally, let me speak to the issue of what the Bank of Ghana is now confirming, despite the fact that the majority in Parliament doesn't want them to speak in public. Yesterday, at the opening of the 131st Monetary Policy Committee meeting, the governor announced that the central bank has ceased pre-financing of the Gold Board's gold purchase program, effective the 1st of July. Let me refresh your memories once again. For months, the minority in Parliament warned that this financing was an unbudgeted quasi-fiscal operation exposing the state to huge losses. We were dismissed. Our motions for investigations were dismissed. At the time, the IMF quantified it at $214 million lost on the Gold for Reserves program. This was around September 2025. By the end of the year, the Bank of Ghana account itself shows that it was around $900 million. That's about the 9.6 billion Ghana cedis that they talk about in their report, which report the finance minister has still not laid before Parliament. Now, those figures were disputed loudly. Now, just yesterday, without apology, the bank has announced that it will stop the financing. This is too little, too late. The losses have already been booked onto the balance sheet in between the 15 billion, the 19 billion, and the cumulative 96 billion underwater. Stopping the bleeding, unfortunately, does not restore the blood. And mark our words, the governor has begun the confession. Soon, the finance minister too will come before this country confessing what we have been saying all along. And very finally, we want to speak about the credibility of some of the promises that they are making going forward. And here, I'll treat it in four major parts. Announcements. We celebrate a lot of announcements that the finance minister makes when he announces them, and we see a lot of headlines. When you go into the details of what has actually been released and executed, it's very disappointing. In June, the finance ministry said it released 1.6 billion Ghana cedis to agriculture. The Agric Ministry put the authorization at rather 910 million Ghana cedis. And then they further argued that even disbursement was lower at 453 million Ghana cedis. Right to information reports indicate 76 to 90% of the big push road contracts worth over 70 billion Ghana cedis are sole sourced. And when the country was assured that payment will not be a problem, we are now finding out that capital execution, as I have already explained to you, is only about 58% of target. So money is a problem. So when announcements are made, that's not what we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at the cash releases because they tell two different stories. It is the cash release that tells the truth. The second is that the jobs numbers are audio announcements. They are in the pipeline. They are not on the payroll. The 24-hour economy promised about 1.7 million jobs. Its direct 2026 allocation is 110 million Ghana cedis. They now claim that they've created about 160,000 jobs and signed some MOUs, but they are not operating projects. And the totals lean on multipliers of 1 to 4. And if you look at the detail of the 160,000 jobs that they are claiming out of a number of filling stations that they say are operating 24 hours, it's laughable. You all know that filling stations were operating in this country before the NDC came to power. So to claim that about 300 or so filling stations are operating 24 hours as evidence of a functioning 24-hour economy program and 160,000 jobs announced out of it is laughable. A memorandum of understanding is not a pay slip. In cocoa, a producer price of 41,000 cedis per ton was announced in February, yet farmers reportedly remained unpaid even as at March, despite a pledged $337 million disbursement. So they announced one thing, but the reality on the ground is another. Let's also talk about the unfinished business the government inherited and has still not dealt with. When the previous administration left office, approximately 98% of all debt eligible for restructuring had been negotiated. The domestic debt exchange restructured $20 billion equivalent and delivered debt service savings. The Eurobond restructuring is what delivered the stock reduction, over $5 billion. Yet, nearly 2 years on, the remaining 2%, just 2%, somebody did 98%, you are left with 2% to do. 2 years on, that 2%, about $2.7 billion, is still unresolved under this government. And where are the promised independent fiscal council, the debt management office, and other institutions? Have they been abandoned or delayed or quietly shelved? Or the new fiscal council, we saw an announcement that the new fiscal council has been put in place. Have they been cowed into silence already, as other critical voices are being cowed into silence by this administration? The fourth issue is that borrowing has already begun. Just 9 weeks after the IMF ECF ended, and even before the IMF board considers the last ECF review, the executive is in Parliament asking for nearly $1 billion. The minority will scrutinize every PESWA, per terms and collateral, and where each CD will actually go. Finally, we think that Thursday's presentation must disclose a few things with numbers and not just assurances. First, the actual half-year execution line by line against allotment, and we'll be asking, did the first quarter pattern persist or did it reverse? Second, a full decomposition of the primary surplus, structural revenue, gold windfall, expenditure compression, valuation effects, and one-offs. Third, one reconciled debt to GDP figure and the methodology they are using for it. Fourth, a current audited arrears stock with a credible payment schedule tied to actual allocations. Number 5, verified payroll employment for the Big Push and the 24-hour economy program, and project-level Big Push procurement disclosure. Number 6, the true loss figure and the resolution plan for the Bank of Ghana. Remember, as we've mentioned, the minister has not presented it to Parliament. A team of NDC persons came to Parliament to do a press conference and understated it at 15 billion when it's actually 34, and if you take away the one-off gold sales, it's about 44. So the true figure must now be published. 7th, sensitivity analysis on gold prices, fuel costs, and the city. And number 8, the status of the Fiscal Council and the Independent Debt Management Office that was promised, as well as a refinancing plan for the growth agenda that names its sources. And here, let me make this point. The minister has already started sounding the market that he's going to announce some new strategies tomorrow. Mr. Minister, there's a mid-year review to assess performance. Policies have already been announced and funded. Any new policy will just be more settings, props, and audio announcements because they are unfunded. Already, you are struggling to fund the announced policies and promises. Desist from the temptation to announce new cities, new policies, and new projects. Ladies and gentlemen, a country cannot build growth on unspent budgets, unpaid contractors, disputed debt numbers, and jobs that exist only on paper. On Thursday, the NPP, through its minority in Parliament, will be in the chamber, measuring the minister's statement line by line against this government's own published data. The Ghanaians deserve numbers and not narratives. We thank you, and we will take your questions at this point. Okay. Men try to me more to talk kakra with you. And you know, I must say, I know Pema Beka and Sawa has said, the NPP Policy Coordination Committee, and Midincha say Bremo. And may any policy committee on finance and economy, and I share what I say. Now, what you know, Busumia Hododa in Yibishia. Now, Numa Ahodua policy committees, Nefia say, and Yadi Atuabonte. And they share Ghana, Sika Semhu. The abonima friendly data, no credit woman, Bank of Ghana publishing, do our finance ministry publishing, do our World Bank IMF publishing. And when I am penny for Nadomo Sukwa, the Ayahu Yadi Beto Abonti and Sana Ochna finance minister about the kind in mid-year review. Edi kan ye hu say omo de intricacy bebree e na omo de announcing numbers bi e ma ne ye nkofo de say Ghana economy no.
Those were live proceedings from the NPP headquarters, where Kojo Nkrumah addressed the press with regards to the upcoming budget media review. And I have with me a head of news here at Channel 1 Television to delve into the matters raised. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you very much.
Right. So for you, what were the key highlights of this particular presentation?
Well, first off, I think it's important that we underscore the fact that Kojo Nkrumah sits as the ranking member on the Economy and Development Committee of Parliament, although he's member of Parliament for Fuasi Ayeribi. Yeah. And so he's speaking in his capacity as a ranking member on that committee. And you will know that with the budget presentation expected tomorrow by the finance minister, by virtue of his position on the committee, he's privy to some information on the and so ahead of that presentation, it is expected that the minority in Parliament will raise certain questions ahead of that. Now, Kojo, we know, has been speaking on a number of issues regarding the economy. He's had cause to raise issues regarding the 24-hour economy and how much has been, if you like, approved and pumped in so far, demanding actuals that can be measured from the implementation of the 24-hour economy. He's spoken about the CD and its appreciation and the fact that there seems to be a downward spiral regarding the appreciation of the CD. He's touched on the gold board and its operations. Just about yesterday, we heard about Parliament, if like going into an assessment of the operations of gold board. And so he's raised a number of issues regarding same, hoping that the finance minister, when he does the presentation tomorrow, will answer some of these questions.
Yeah. In concluding his remarks, he made a point there saying that any new policy will be certain.
Well, you can understand that, of course, there's the actual economy, that's the real economy that you and I actually feel. And so when they have their conversations about the macro and the micro, it is what matters to you and I that is most important. However, you also understand that there's politics also involved. So, I mean, they'll have the political economy where the figures on paper will look good, and then they'll have the actual economy that deals with how much is you and I, how much is in our pockets, and how much a margarine container of Gary will cost out there on the market. And so, on the political side, well, he has room to, if like, raise opposition to maybe an introduction of a new policy. With the mid-year budget review, you are not expecting the announcement of any new taxes. However, there's a possibility of a policy or a policy direction towards, it could be towards revenue mobilization, which, of course, at the end of the day might result in some taxation or otherwise. But there are a number of issues that will be expected from the finance minister tomorrow. We've had the business community, if like put out their own expectations and especially demands regarding the energy sector.
I think the automobile industry as well also making some demands.
So there's the utilities on one side, there's fuel also on another side, and then there's VAT, and then of course tax waivers and all those issues. So you've had the automobile industry actually asked that
they move some 20%. Waiver
is reintroduced to help grow the automobile industry or the automotive assembly industry in the country.
Okay, finally to conclude, what are some of the benefits of some of these press conferences? It puts the government on its toes, does it not?
Indeed, it does. And then you expect that as any government or any party in power, you would want to have a functioning opposition that can bring the fire to your toes and keep you, if you like, in a steady, because sometimes the power can, it has its own way of getting you to relax, especially when you're enjoying some level of goodwill, complacency might set in, and all that. So if you have an opposition that is able to put in proper critique of your work and your policies, it helps shape the direction. And indeed, as Ghanaians, that's what we should be interested in, that you have a functioning opposition that brings the heat to the fire when it comes to governance in the country, and not just an opposition that will wake up and oppose any and everything, irrespective of the benefits to the country.
Thank you so much, Nana Tufo-Boateng. Nana Tufo-Boateng is head of news here at Channel 1 Television as well as City FM. It's now time for our major afternoon news bulletin, news feed. Hello again, good afternoon and welcome back to Newsfeed here on Channel 1 Television. I am Samuel Akom. Coming up, Attorney General declines plea bargain in Wontumi Exim Bank case. Also coming up, Wontumi's lawyers to file appeal against 20-year sentence next week. And coming up in business, Ghana's reserve drops by $1.2 billion. Import cover slips to 5 months. And later in sport, Ghana's Black Bombers target gold at 2026 Glasgow Commonwealth Games. Details of that and several others coming your way this very afternoon. But thank you for choosing Newsfeed. Let's settle for the details of our stories now. The Office of the Attorney General has rejected a plea bargaining proposal submitted by lawyers representing Bernard Ntwi-Bosiaku, popularly known as Chairman Wontumi. This is in relation to criminal charges stemming from a loan facility he obtained from the Ghana Export-Import Bank. In an interview with TV3 Ghana, Deputy Attorney General Dr. Shrem Sai said the proposal put forward by Chairman Wontumi's legal team failed to meet the expectations of the state.
They made a plea proposal of what they want to offer. We, in our opinion, they've not satisfied us, so we intend to reject it. In fact, we have in our minds rejected it, just that we've not had a meeting with them to inform them of our rejection. So it's like any bargaining. You give, you take. So we were supposed to meet yesterday, but of course what happened yesterday couldn't allow the meeting. And we are still trying to get that meeting done before we go back to court next week.
What was brought to the table that you're rejecting?
They offered to pay some amount.
How much?
No, that is, it's enough that we are still bargaining. But the plea bargain itself is supposed to be, it's not supposed to be out there. When we finish, we announce the conclusion. But they made an offer. It's enough for the public to know that they made an offer which we found inadequate, and we're going to meet them to inform them of our rejection.
Let's stay with matters related to Bernard Ntwi-Bosiaku because his lead counsel, Samuel Atachia, says his legal team will file an appeal against the 20-year prison sentence handed to their client by next week. Chairman Wontumi was sentenced by an Accra High Court on Monday, July 19, over illegal mining activities on the Samra Boy concession in the Western region. Speaking to Channel 1 News, Samuel Atachia criticized the prosecution's decision to rely on 2 accused persons as witnesses after they entered plea bargain agreement.
We've already put together our grounds of appeal, and it's under consideration. Immediately, the conclave agrees that, look, what we have put together is very sound. We shouldn't waste time. I'm tempted to believe that latest by next week we should file our notice of appeal.
Let's now take you back live to the NPP headquarters, where former Finance Minister Dr. Amin Adam is also currently addressing the press.
$900 million is justified because of that stability. I don't think Ghanaians, will just accept this. They must give us proper explanation. And I tell you, is it that they don't want the stability again if the Bank of Ghana is now announcing that they will cease the pre-financing of gold purchases? They don't want the stability again. They still want the stability. So why will they stop the financing of gold bought? already inflation has inched up from 3.4% to 5.3%. We are losing it. The cedi, which was appreciating in 2025, remember they said the cedi appreciated by about 40%. From the beginning of 2026 to date, the cedi has depreciated by about 8%. Depreciated by 8%. It's no longer appreciating the appreciation we saw in 2025. Today, it is depreciated by 8%. And if you go to the market, by more than 10%. Don't they want the stability again? So why are they stopping the financing of the gold board purchases? And so let's don't take this explanation, which I think is below the belt.
Thank you. We'll take another round of questions. By the way, when Dr. Amin talked of reserves, the Bank of Ghana data shows that in the last about 2 to 3 months, our reserves have lost about $1.2 billion. The minister needs to explain to us where those reserves have gone. Have they used it for market intervention, i.e. pumping on the market, which they have now coined a new phrase for, which they call market intermediation, or what? Where is the $1.2 billion of our reserves going to? Colleagues, I'll take a final batch of questions, if there are any. Final batch of questions, if there are any. Let us say, NPP are buying senior money, about January 7th, 2017. September 9th, we are here, a free SHS. Now, NPP are buying the Okra and say, free SHS are there. Here's or minor, and Casaman, and here's some. Until minor being seeker or sending them a dick and penny for say, here, and Sunday, the heading, a fata.
Those were live proceedings from the NPP headquarters. Earlier, Dr. Amin Adam, former finance minister, answered some questions. And as we speak, journalists are still putting forth their questions to the leaders or the individuals who address the press. That is Kojo Oppong Nkrumah as well as Dr. Amin Adam. And some of the questions that have come up are with regards to current happenings with Ghana's finances. And so that is what is currently happening. And if you can hear from the feed, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah is trying to explain to a question by a journalist with regards to the inflation rate. So Dr. Amin Adam in his speech actually said this year, between January till now, the cedi has depreciated by 8%, and it is expected that the Finance Minister, Dr. Kasiel Atuforsin, God willing, tomorrow, during the presentation of that mid-year budget review, will put some answers to some of the happenings and things that have been said at this particular press conference. So we look forward to that particular presentation. But away from that, to some more stories with regards to the NPP Ashanti Regional Chairman, former National Chairman of the NPP, Paul Afoko, has described a 20-year sentence handed to Bernard Entry Bosiakon as an excessive one. Chairman Wontumi was convicted on 6 counts of assigning mineral rights without approval and other illegal mining offences. Speaking on Channel 1 Television's Face to Face, Paul Afoko, who is vying for the party's chairmanship position, says he was saddened by the sentence.
In fact, just before we went on the break, we were talking about my prison experience.
Yes.
So when I first heard it, I was on my way from Kumasi coming to Accra, and I thought my heart went out to him because I know what prison is like in Ghana. It's not like Sweden where you have the whole suite to yourself and your private toilet and TV and all that. I know how it is. My heart went out to him, and I thought, gosh, this is too much. 20 years. But then as I started, because I never really followed the case, as I started to ask questions, I was actually told that before the change in the law by the NPP government, the maximum sentence would have been somewhere around 3 to 5 years.
5 years.
And that we had changed it to a minimum of 15 and a maximum of 25.
Yeah.
And so apparently the judge came in between and gave 20. I said to myself, even the minimum of 15 would also have been too much.
Let's now take you to the Ashanti region, where the Regional National Security Secretariat has arrested a man suspected of engaging in illegal mining activities near the Agenda 111 Hospital project site at Adanse Asokwa. The suspect, identified as Yusuf Ibrahim and believed to be the owner of the mining site, was arrested on Tuesday, July 21, 2026, when the National Security officers visited the area as part of an inspection exercise. At the time of the operation, mining activities were ongoing at the site, leading to the arrest of the suspect. The Ashanti Regional National Security Coordinator, Alhaji Inji Abdallah Umar, said the action forms part of measures by the Secretariat to intensify the fight against illegal mining activities in the region.
Well, some few weeks ago, we know how it was heavily degraded by illegal miners. Those who you are claiming we are treating them with kids' gloves or whatever. As you can attest with me, whilst we are here, we've just picked some of the workers or some of the boys who are still around trying to work on the land to the RCC, and heavily degraded some few weeks ago, and now given a second chance. So that is part of the fight for getting our lands back. And I can assure you, we are going to take them on, especially the illegal miners who did that wrong in this place. We are all worried as Ghanaians as to what is happening. And as I'm saying, we are here with the committee. And I've also said that we are investigating everything that is going on.
Just to watch your newsfeed on Channel 1 Television. Up next is business. And in business, Ghana's reserve position came under pressure in the first half of 2026, with the country's gross international reserves declining by $1.2 billion between March and June, despite strong growth in export earnings. Latest data from the Bank of Ghana shows that Ghana's gross international reserves fell from $14.16 billion in March 2026 to $12.94 billion by June 2026. There is more in the following report.
This decline reduced the country's import cover from 5.7 months to 5 months, indicating a small buffer of foreign currency available to meet the country's external payment obligations. Net international reserves also weakened over the same period. It dropped from $11.87 billion to $10.8 billion. The fall in reserves comes at a time when Ghana has been recording stronger export performance, driven largely by gold. Total exports increased significantly from $8.51 billion in March to $18.29 billion in June 2026, with gold remaining the dominant contributor. Gold exports more than doubled, rising from $5.26 billion to $12.5 billion, while cocoa exports increased from $1.65 billion to $2.29 billion. Oil exports also recorded significant growth, moving from $753 million to $1.71 billion, while other exports rose to $858 million to $1.79 billion. The strong exports performance supported a wider trade surplus, with Ghana's trade balance improving from $4.53 billion to $8.81 billion over the period. However, higher export earnings did not translate into stronger reserves, largely due to increased foreign exchange outflows and rising import demand. The decline in reserves matters because international reserves play a critical role in supporting exchange rate stability, meeting import needs, and maintaining investor confidence.
Still in business, the pilot phase of Ghana's 24-hour economy program is beginning to deliver measurable gains in the downstream petroleum sector, with participating fuel depots reporting increased productivity and improved operational efficiency. An overnight monitoring exercise led by the Chief Executive Office of the National Petroleum Authority, Godwin Eduji Tamaklu, at selected petroleum depot in Tema found that extended operating hours are enabling companies to process more fuel trucks, reduce turnaround times and fulfill customer orders more quickly.
The facilities visited included Quantum Terminals Group, Petroleum Hub Limited, Tema Fuel Company Limited and Vana Energy Limited. Management of the companies reported improved efficiency since the pilot program began.
As you can see, that's our loading gantry. We have 6 bays operational. And with the introduction of the 24-hour economy, we've been able to increase our throughput because now the time frame is extended.
Since we joined in the initiative, we've had smooth operations. All the drivers get their orders loaded, and we also make sure that all the orders that comes to the facility is fulfilled. Like we fulfill all our orders.
So we always had the challenge. So any time that we are going beyond 5, we have to be either getting the customers themselves to put